Welcome to the part 2 of this story. Years had passed since Grace married Elijah. Their home echoed with laughter, love, and quiet prayers. They had 3 children, Samuel, Hope, and Anna. Each morning, just as the sun painted the sky in soft orange, Grace still walked to the little church on the hill, this time with Samuel holding one hand and Anna clutching the other. Hope, now a little older, often ran ahead to open the church door. Grace taught them not just how to pray, but why to pray. Not everything will go the way we want, she'd say gently, but if we stay close to God, our hearts will never be empty. She prayed for her children to be kind, courageous, and faithful. She prayed that they would learn to hear God's voice, not in loud miracles, but in quiet moments. One rainy afternoon, Grace noticed a girl sitting alone by the market fountain. She was soaked, shivering, and clearly hadn't eaten. Grace invited her home. The girl's name was Leah. She had run away from her stepfather, who mistreated her, and she had nowhere to go. Elijah built a small bed in the attic, and Grace gave her food, clothes, and a listening ear. Leah had never known what kindness felt like. At first, she distrusted Grace's peace. "How are you always happy?" Leah asked bitterly one evening. Grace smiled. "I'm not always happy, but I always have hope. And hope lives where God is." Leah stayed, and slowly the darkness in her eyes softened. She followed Grace to church and started whispering her own prayers. The little church on the hill began to fill. More villagers came, not just for sermons, but to find the same peace they saw in Grace. Grace and Elijah started hosting weekly meals at the church. Widows, orphans, and lonely hearts came not for bread alone, but for warmth and dignity. One day the pastor grew sick and asked Grace to speak in his place. She hesitated. "I'm no preacher." "But you live the word," he said. And so, with shaking hands and a steady heart, Grace stood before the congregation and shared her story of faith through pain, of provision in need, of a God who never turned away. Tears filled the eyes of those listening. That day, 3 more girls asked if they could stay with her. Her home became more than a house. It became a refuge. One morning, Grace received a letter. It was from her younger brother, whom she hadn't seen in years. He had joined the military, lost his way, and been too ashamed to write. But he'd heard of a woman named Grace who helped the poor and prayed every morning. "I wondered if it could be you," the letter said. "And if it is, can I come home?" Grace cried as she read it. "Come home," she wrote back. "There's always room." A week later, he returned, broken, quiet, but ready to heal. Grace embraced him like the prodigal son. Now an older woman, Grace stood once again at the altar of the church on the hill. Her hair was gray, her hands worn, but her eyes were bright. The church was full. Children she had raised, neighbors she had helped, strangers turned family. Her children now served the village. Hope became a teacher, Samuel a doctor, Anna a musician who led worship every Sunday. Leah, she became a counselor, helping other girls find safety and faith. And when Grace finally passed on, it was not in sorrow but in peace. Her life had been a seed that grew into a forest. On her gravestone, the villagers carved her favorite verse. "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Psalm 34:18. But no one really needed the stone to remember her. She had already written her story in their hearts. This story is really lovely, so if you enjoyed it, click on the subscription button, like, and comment. More of this video is coming soon. Now, do you know that? Years after Grace passed, the village still felt her presence. The little church on the hill now had a new name, Grace Chapel. Children would ask, "Who was Grace?" And their parents would smile and say, "She was a woman who prayed, a woman who loved, a woman who showed us God." Every morning the bells rang at dawn, just like they did when Grace walked up that path with her children. And every evening candles lit the windows, placed by those whose lives she had touched. Leah now led a home for girls, and above the fireplace, she hung a simple wooden sign, "God sees the heart." That was Grace's favorite saying. Though her voice no longer echoed in the church, her life continued in the prayers of others. In every act of kindness, every whispered prayer, every soul who turned to God in their time of need, Grace was there, not in body, but in spirit, not in words, but in love. The girl who once had nothing had left behind everything that truly mattered. Moral lessons from Grace's story: 1. Faithfulness in small things leads to big miracles. Grace didn't wait for a perfect moment. She prayed daily, served quietly, and trusted God even in pain. Her consistent devotion made room for divine transformation. 2. Hardship doesn't disqualify you, it prepares you. Grace Grace's struggles shaped her strength. What others saw as weakness, God used as a foundation for something greater. 3. Kindness is contagious. One act of kindness, a prayer, a shared umbrella, a warm meal, set off a ripple that changed a village. You never know how far your compassion can reach. 4. God often works through the humble and unseen. Grace wasn't rich, powerful, or famous, but her quiet obedience changed lives. You don't have to be big to be used by God. 5. Healing begins with listening and loving. Grace welcomed the broken, like Leah and others, not with sermons but with shelter, food, and presence. Sometimes love is the miracle. 6. Don't underestimate the power of a praying woman. Through prayer, Grace endured, saw visions, found love, and birthed a movement. Her prayers were powerful because her heart was aligned with God. 7. True legacy is measured in changed lives. Grace's impact wasn't in wealth or fame, but in the hearts she healed, the souls she inspired, and the love she left behind. Thanks for watching to the end. Another inspiring story is coming soon. Click on the subscription button, like, and comment.